We've tried to kind of summarize the group discussions. I think we'll kind of keep going down that list, and then if we got to go back for anything, we can go back, but just kind of keep the momentum we had going last time and keep going through the list of suggestions that were out there. We can come back and see if the group has anything else that they'd like to add to that. And then we can kind of talk about breakout groups if there's something we need to look further into. And then, I think once we kind of have this list, we can kind of start looking to, where we go from here as far as the write-up. We'll send out the what the moratorium committee did. It was kind of a template of the who, what, why for each item, and if people have certain ones that they like, we kind of focus on those.
Okay, so that's the question I wanted to ask. We write, what the next step is, like the actual document that comes out.
Once we finally get to a certain number of recommendations that you want to make, and some are going to be bigger ones versus smaller ones, obviously. Once we get to that point where you're comfortable with the number that you want to deal with, we're going to break you up and have each group do a certain number.
Okay.
And obviously, if there's a lot to be written in one versus a little to be written in another, you get a lot of little ones and you get a couple of big ones. But we'll try and break you up and hopefully have more people to be doing that. But you guys seem to be the mainstays as it keeps coming. We'll break you up, give you a couple weeks to work on it. We'll give you a format to use, and then we'll go through it all together, make sure everybody's comfortable with what's written for each one, and pull it all together in the end once everything's been edited to everybody's satisfaction, and prepare it as a final document to get to the town board.
I say we can be the compilers, and we'll make sure it has a common voice. So, it's different people are writing parts of it, but at least it's your thoughts, your comments, your words. The group will obviously have final approvals on it and everything else, but we can at least compile this section from each person, worry about formatting and worry about that part of it. So.
Make it just cohesive so it sounds like one group road versus just little parts of the group for everybody.
So I say if we want to jump back in, I think skate park is where I kind of had that left off. I'll throw that out there if we want to start with that one and see what the group's thoughts are, and then we'll keep, like we did last time, kind of go down through each item and yay or nay, need more discussion, further input from another group, whatever you think.
And once we get to the end, we've got all the decided ones that are left over. We'll go back to those and try and hit them and figure out what you want to do with those and come to a conclusion on each of those.
As we get further down the list, some of them are very small frequencies.
Yes.
Do we
Yeah.
even
shift
need to?
to-
So if a group wants to take 5 or 6 of those as a frequent, as a small item, you can just create something to accommodate that versus somebody having to do one big one you're going to spend some time on.
Lots of ones and twos.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think at least we can say as the group, we went through all of it. If somebody says you didn't talk about my item, maybe go down through there and say motorsports.
It goes back
The group says, yeah, we don't want it, but at least we can say that the group thoroughly vetted every comment that came in, every suggestion, whether you like it or not. May not need to spend a lot of time on it, but at least, nobody says you never talked about mine or I didn't get due consideration. So skate park.
I wondered what that meant.
So I would say the skate park is typically pretty cement focused, feature focused, and in my opinion, it doesn't jive with the rest of the suggestions, the ones that have many more.
Once I know
It's rollerblades and skate.
Yeah, so rails and
that kind of stuff.
half pipes. And
That's what I
like that.
assumed. In fact, I brought rollerblades from above down to that and mixed it in and said it must all be along the same lines.
I think rollerbladers could use a path if we had a path.
Like a runner.
Right.
Yeah, right.
That's an excellent point. You
Okay.
certainly want to make that as a recommendation if that's what you're thinking about, rather than having a skating park there.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, okay. Good. Yeah, I'd say for a
Does anybody
skate
have
park
any,
itself, no.
Okay.
No, I'm absolutely no.
Okay, consensus is no.
Yeah. Okay.
Do we even need to talk?
Commercial mixed use.
I think that's
Thought
kind of
about the
generic.
intent, but at least we can say the group discussed it.
Yeah, that's good discussion.
As I said, some of these might be short.
Thoroughly
Good talk,
done.
very good talk.
Festival site farm markets.
Good. interesting.
It would be like in a parking lot, usually, that they're
Farmers
held.
market.
Yeah.
And if somebody would want to get a permit for a weekend to do it, knock yourself
Or
out.
several days throughout the summer
Yeah.
on a Wednesday or something
Yeah,
like that.
or during the
Or
week, yeah,
Saturday,
like they
yeah.
do various parking lots all over the
That's a
county.
yes. Yeah.
Well, is it something that we have to organize, or it's just
No,
like you
no,
said?
no,
It's just-
no,
No.
I kind of threw it in with a whole group of other things, like, tennis courts and volleyball and whatever else, and said, it's acceptable, and it could work there, and it could be determined at some other point, but just, as you said, maybe taking a whole group that somebody's gonna take together, say, these are all to us acceptable and
Yes.
reasonable uses, and won't interfere with anything, so fine.
Like,
So that's kind of where I gave it an A, acceptable.
like if an individual calls you guys and says, is it available, is there a place available on a particular day to have such and such? You guys, oh yeah, it's on the list, knock yourself out,
How's everybody
something
feel?
like that. Yeah,
I'm fine with it.
We already have a parking lot, is that available to us at the Clark House? Is that-
Well, that's
is
the other
that
thing,
part of the
that
property?
we have a parking lot there. If the Clark House is leased off to somebody who needs a parking lot,
That parking lot
you might
is,
need another parking lot.
the parking lot is gone, yeah.
And
okay.
you might need another parking lot anyways, because
Yeah.
if the Clark House is a viable operation, whatever it may be, you're gonna have other people just wanting to go, like, I saw over the weekend, there were a ton of people out doing a lot of cross-country skiing, which was
Yeah,
great to
that's
see that.
awesome.
But there were also a lot of cars there parked and they need to be parked. I mean, you need to put them somewhere safe.
Thinking about new parking lots, what about the buffer, the 200-foot buffer?
Well, it's only buildings, you
Yeah,
can't put a
lots can-
building in, but
parking
you
lots can be
can
in that
put
space.
certain amenities such as
Because I
parking.
thought it said only driveways and trails.
I think that they would allow that to occur, and actually, you may not want it right on the road. You might
Well,
want to
no, I
keep a
know,
green
but I'm-
space along the road anyways, and have it interior to the,
I have this
to the park.
concept that almost everything is, except for driveways and trails, is pushed back 200 feet.
and that might be a recommendation.
And that's not for us to worry about. but
No,
when
it
you-
isn't.
When you think about allocating space,
Right.
you've lost some.
I think about it, just as a employee, I think about, obviously, you're trying to maintain buffers from the people that live around the park. And certainly, if you're going to impact anything, you want to make sure you're not doing that, but you're doing it somewhere to the edge of the park by the roads or just inside the buffer area to provide for some buffer from people.
And if we establish that, athletic fields and that kind of stuff, we're gonna need parking lots anyway, so we have to.
Yeah, well, whatever you do, you're gonna need parking.
Yeah, right.
Even
Yeah, and that's
even
what I
if you
was-
do a
that's what
shelter.
exactly what I was thinking about. If
You
the
do
parking
shelter
lot is
in the
near the
parking
road,
lot.
or maybe it can't be near the road
Yeah,
because of the buffer
right,
zone.
yeah.
That's,
And maybe the recommendation would be if there's parking is buffered so that it's kind of,
Hidden.
yeah, it's kind of hidden, so you're not looking to see of asphalt somewhere where you can actually buffer it off and make it look nice. So is everybody
We're a
comfortable
yes.
with the idea of possibly having some kind of a
Yeah,
Yeah, I
intermittent
think I'm
festival type thing, or?
Yeah,
Yes.
not a permanent thing, but a,
yeah,
Hey, wait a minute,
temporary.
now, what's a festival?
Well, we talked about the farm market, what's a
Farm market,
festival?
yes, what's a festival?
well, so a mini
the-
lilac festival. Or a,
Like a
or
July
a East
party.
Side wine and beer festival. I don't know, so just to give you guys something to think about.
Wine and beer?
Well, I like it.
I mean, yeah, I could go with that, no.
Well, when you're doing your recommendations, you want to kind of talk about the scale and scope.
Yeah.
You probably don't want the Monroe County Fair there, right?
No.
No,
Okay, so.
Yeah, I think festival is just kind of a generic term. The subcommittee can flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay. I'd say acceptable.
okay, so we're okay.
Yeah, I don't think we're looking at having a state fair there.
no.
Yeah, right.
Next one down,
This
the
looks like he was looking at the state fair. apparently.
town library.
No.
All right, library.
What about the South Trail mountain biking, that's
I'm gonna vote
okay?
for that.
Well,
I also,
Going down the list.
did we skipped past, well, we had already decided on golf course,
Yeah.
right? The new
Yeah.
lodges, we talked about being by the barn possibly.
we're still at the library, I think.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, library's the next one I had.
so.
Constituted within a new community center, perhaps.
That's what I think.
Or like a new community center, a special project that would be
Yes.
other than what we're looking at here.
Yeah. So they're running out of space, the library people are. As are you guys.
Can I ask a question? What is the viability of expansion at the
At that
current
site.
library
Property.
community center? And I realize that when you talk about expansion on an old building, costs go through the roof versus just building new. But, I get into that question a lot, and I don't really have a good answer.
The biggest issue, truthfully, Andy, is, and I've shared this with other groups before, is the property that it sits on. The only location you even remotely can expand to from a facility standpoint would be to the east, towards Baird Road. Because every other direction, you're gonna go to the school property. As soon as you step off,
Don't we have a map that shows that?
yeah, as soon as you step off the parking lot.
It's working, and I think we're gonna.
Oh, okay.
You know, as you said, the issue too with that facility is because of the age of the structure, to renovate it with everything that's currently underground there between the sewer and the electrical, it's,
And all the new codes and...
exactly, it's extremely difficult. Factor in, if you're gonna build onto that building, whether it's library or rec, now you, just like we just talked about, from a parking standpoint, we're already certain days maxed out for the
Well,
parking.
especially with the school district using the back half of the parking lot.
Yeah, so like, at 3 o'clock during certain times of the year, if there's baseball games or softball games going on, parents are parking on in that facility. So that's the other issue. So it's really just the spot that you're at. I mean, if you own the fields, or if the fields next to us were the towns where we could, we could play with that a little bit in regards to what they were used for, you'd have a better option, at least.
You can't
More
build,
viable.
you can't build up at all.
The only place, the other way you can go is straight up. which-
Yeah.
Right.
You just still
Obviously.
need parking to accommodate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, you go back to me and
The
build
best thing you can do is
like-
expand internally,
Put a
take
parking
somebody
garage
out, and then expand that into whatever remains.
That's always been the biggest concern. We get that a lot even from a field standpoint is, we got these extra fields. Well, those fields that are at the community center, we don't dictate what goes on those fields.
Yeah, it
Those are
is,
school?
Those are all school.
Yeah, okay.
it is deceptive, because you
Yeah.
think the whole thing is
Yeah,
on
I mean,
the green mile.
during the summertime, it's nice because we do have access to some of those fields, for our camp program and different activities, but ultimately, if they decide they want to put I don't know, whatever, on one of those fields, they're gonna do it.
And I'm just kind of throwing this out there, but when you look at the property to the north, heading towards the cemetery,
Mhm.
the school district owns that land, right? So would they ever consider selling, donating?
So,
Because it's just kind of grass.
They need a
That one little strip, so if you, right where Doug is now, that one little strip is about really the only piece that I would say is unusable to the school. I mean, they're not gonna do anything with it. That
But they
other
use it
field,
as their calculation for the green space that they're required
correct,
to
they're
have.
required to have. I mean, there's no program activity in there, but that is, one of their only, I'll say,
But are they near like a boundary of green space that they're supposed to have? I mean, do they have
They
access?
just meet it now.
They just meet it
If
now?
they took anything
so
else off, I
if
don't
they
know.
lost
Yeah.
that 3/4 of an acre, it'd probably throw them off.
Yeah, and I think when they drew that up, they made sure they met it through that, because they're the ones that subdivided that out.
And that field there where Doug's, no, that's their JV baseball field,
Yeah.
and then it's also used as a modified soccer field, so it's actually dual purpose.
So that property is really landlocked.
Totally landlocked. They now where it says 2029, that used to be some green space, but now that's actually become that right there is now where their discus and shot put area is. They have, the girls softball field is further down here.
Yeah.
There you go. So,
What's the difference between softball field and, when I played softball, it was on a baseball field. Is there a difference?
well, that's what they call, that softball field is what they call a skid field, so there's no grass on the infield.
But it's shorter baselines.
It's shorter
Shorter.
baselines. Yeah. The real purpose of that, because you're starting to see some of the younger, actually you see it out here at Little League, some of the Little League fields are going to a skin field because the ball rolls easier instead of the ball getting stuck in the grass, et cetera. So you tend to use a skin field.
No pitcher's mound?
There's a pitcher's mound, but it's not raised.
Not raised.
Well, and they
that's-
use the skin fields through college too, so it's just, it's the whole concept of softball.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't just use it because the ball slows down.
Correct.
It's what it
That's
is.
why they're transitioning the baseball kids to it though. So that way, and it makes sense because now you got you can put, instead of girls only having to play, or the softball only having to play on 2 fields, now they've got the ability to be on, 3, 4 different fields.
I'd kind of like to say something, my personal opinion about buildings going on Shadow Pines. I'm pretty much against any major permanent building going there other than rustic lodges. And that's similar to what was said in the moratorium committee. The primary recommendation was open space for recreation. And I'd kind of like to say that I would like to see it kept that way, that various forms of recreation are fine, but the idea of a community center to me is all wrong. And it goes against the concept of recreational use of a very valuable piece of open space. That's where I'm coming from, just one person, but I don't like to see any buildings going in there.
I agree.
Are there other properties in Penfield, especially owned by the town, that can be converted to use for recreation or the library? Do we know?
I mean, Rothfuss Park initially was designated for a senior center or something over there in initial concept. Not saying it can't go back to that, or that isn't a possibility. This campus, we had continued to grow through the years, obviously with ball fields and everything else. I mean, there's other options out there. It's just sometimes maybe acquiring additional property.
Yeah. Because it seems to me we shouldn't be talking about any kind of a building on this property if there are alternatives. Or we can at least know.
And I think that was some of the, at least what I captured from the group last time, was about athletic fields. I don't think people were overly thrilled about them, but said, hey, once we exhaust all the, other possibilities, then yes, it's possible. And maybe that could be the recommendation from the group is, yes, investigate other areas, and if there's other parks and properties that could handle a community center, library, let's investigate those first. If this is the last possible spot, and it doesn't make sense anywhere else, then yes, that's the last choice, then okay. Maybe that's
Is
the,
there an option that if we needed space, let's say for recreation offices or for senior citizens activities or something on a smaller scale, that the Clark House could provide, that could be reconfigured inside in a lot of different ways, and ultimately the barn, if it's ever worth saving.
I'm not sure the Clark House is big enough. I mean, if you were going to
It's
do
so
it...
cut up, that's the
right.
problem.
It's kind of,
You can't-
yeah.
There's not like, if you were to sit down and
But
have
if something like
some
the
kind of a...
recreation department needed spaces, that might serve
Well,
the
anything is
purpose.
possible, it depends
Yeah, I
on...
mean, it would meet a need from a meeting standpoint.
And that would give more space to the library for expansion if they moved out of there.
Bob, following up on your train of thought, I mean, what about moving the courts? If we move the courts
Yeah.
to a different site, then does that free up proper space for library,
Sure, I mean,
community center?
that's been investigated or looked at in the past. I mean,
sure it has.
it does, again, it doesn't solve the issue, I don't think, and I won't speak for Bunny, but it doesn't solve the issue for the library, it doesn't solve the issue for rec. It gives us a temporary fix, because, if you just took over what space that they have there, and I'm just ballparking, it's probably between the 2 courtrooms. Each one of those rooms is probably about 2,500 square feet. So you might pick up, maybe 4,000 square feet between the 2 spaces. If you split that between rec and, again, it's not a huge impact.
maybe library it's more beneficial. I mean, you're looking for,
Correct, I would say, for what
you're
we're
looking for
similar
basketball
to the
courts
Clark House.
and
Right.
fields, you're not looking for more office
If you're looking for
space.
multi-purpose space where it's just meeting rooms, yeah, it could be subdivided for something like that. But for what we typically do, it would be, just be I'll use the word, it's a Band-Aid. The library may find benefit out of it, but.
I mean, recreation, you've got one multi-purpose basketball court room
Single.
space. I mean, you're looking for
And-
more
And the
court
idea
space.
for even if you look at Veterans Memorial from another facility, if you were to go to a location like Veterans or even Rothfuss, both of those sites, compared to what we have at the community center or on Baird Road, they give you the option to be able to have access to more land. So yeah, you could do that. You could build a facility, whether it was here. What you would do though is, especially at a location like this, is you would impact current athletic space, because basically, as you see on the map, we're maxed out with what we own. So if you were to put one, you'd lose, 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be from an athletic field that you'd have to absorb someplace else. It's not like these are, fields that sit idle. So that would just have to be absorbed someplace else. And it might just be I'll say a reshuffling of where fields might be or where they're located.
There's been some input, maybe this is not the right time to discuss, from seniors wanting more capacity at the community center, at the library. And I'm not sure what it is they're looking for, what sort of space.
I think theirs would be,
facility they're looking for.
I would classify the type of things that we hear from that group. It tends to be more multi-purpose based. Meeting space, program space where...
Like the big common use?
Correct. So you could have a lecture in there for 10 people, or you could open up a dividable wall and have a lecture for 50 people. More...
Space for dancing and
Correct.
stuff like that.
That when, in the evening, when those type of programs that they're participating may not be typically offered, it can be cleared out and it can be used as a dance room or a yoga room or whatever.
The Clark House doesn't do that.
No.
I have a kind of out of the box idea, maybe. There's empty storefront in some of the strip malls, like, the one that's by the big Penfield Wegmans. There's some empty storefront there. There's some empty storefront, I believe, in Panorama Plaza. Would it be possible to rent some of that space to help with some community activities?
I guess it's always an option.
There's a short-term solution.
Correct. I would say there's always the issue of you're in there and then they can get a viable tenant in there for a long term. They're obviously then.
Yeah.
The other concern that we typically have, and we run into it now, is as we utilize, especially from a school district, is we don't have what I'll say is a centralized facility. We're all over. So if your program is at a storefront over here on the east side of town, and your son or your daughter's program is at the community center, you've got two different locations. It's difficult for people to be in multiple spots, obviously. So what we lack now from space is very similar. While we might be able to make up in a gym or in a cafeteria in one of the schools, again, it just sort of puts people all over town versus having a centralized facility.
I felt back to Bob's point that we could be saying these two kinds of things, the library, the rec center, are big future projects that need to be looked at and analyzed and decided on and, become a whole community effort, not necessarily for what we're trying to do here in this space. I agree. Go along with the no buildings idea.
I do too.
I think we need to really crisp up what problem we're trying to solve too. Like, are we trying to solve a centralized space that has all these things? Or are we just trying to solve space? Or, we have to really crisp up our problem statement with respect to community center and library.
Well, I think we were commissioned to make recommendations on what to do with the open space that the townspeople voted for in order to prevent development from happening there. So now we're being asked to suggest what types of recreational uses are best for it. That's the way I look at our job.
Right, I do too. But we keep coming back to this community center or library, and we're not really looking at it from the point of view of what is the problem with the community center or library that this is a viable option for.
I'm not sure that we should
Well,
even
this-
attempt to do that.
Okay.
We don't have the data to deal with.
That's
Okay.
not our task.
So then I think we should
Say no.
And if
say no.
Say no.
we look at the numbers of
This is just
frequency,
212 acres of space, and
Yeah.
would it make sense to have any sort of those items on this space that's out there?
And, you know, quite honestly, just because an individual on here is a proponent of it does not necessarily mean it's a even matter of discussion, quite honestly. It might be a waste of time, like this might,
Motorsports might be an example.
yeah, exactly. So,
Somebody to-
I think we should say no.
I agree.
So the consensus is no?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Yes.
no.
Yes, no.
Yes, no, yeah, no.
I'm just gonna say no to be safe, Terry. No.
Oh,
Bus garage.
Next one was a suggestion for bus garage or DPW facility.
I say no, and it's the same issue with the community center, extends to the bus
Restrooms,
garage.
Oh, we did go, yeah.
previously, I
Okay.
think,
No,
Okay. Disc golf.
it is kind of fun.
Yeah, that's minimally
Minimally invasive, yeah.
It's
invasive.
like festival sites.
Yeah, I agree.
Just goes in the
Easy,
same bucket. They're all
There's dedicated space for it. So there
I wouldn't say
are
we've had.
Yeah.
permanent fixes out there.
Right.
There's usually pads and they've kind of got holes, as you
Yeah.
want to say, so you would have to dedicate space for it, so.
Yeah, but I think it fits within the context of what this, people really seem to want this space for.
Slow impact.
It's low impact,
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
it's recreation,
can even do
it's
it-
getting people outside.
Do it in the wintertime, too.
You
Yeah,
can do
true.
it in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Again, it's something that could be acceptable, not necessarily, that we want to fund it to
Yeah.
start out. but
Right.
Space is good for it.
Actually, I've-
Acceptable consideration for the future.
I have sitting on my desk from the, I think it's the Rochester Disc Golf Association, I have a request for them to use the property
Sure.
in the summertime for a tournament.
Do you want us to
Oh,
bring them
really?
in? Is there any value to you talking to these people?
Can we trust Chris?
Bring them in or not?
I think it would be interesting, but not I mean, in my opinion, it
Well, it
would
would-
be interesting, but not a.
It would only be interesting to know how much area they need.
Yeah.
Or how much they're gonna
Well,
dedicate.
Does it have to be
find
dedicated
out,
space?
right?
Elson Park.
Yeah, they got one, they got one
Both
over,
sides.
they got a half of one over in Webster at North Ponds. I mean, there's a number of them around. It's a, I looked them up, I did some research on it. It's,
What's required? They put out a hoop or a
yeah,
basket?
and for what they're looking to do, it would be temporary, so they do it for a weekend, they bring it out. and-
Oh,
They
But
Because we were the
but I'm
impression
sure
that-
if we went to them, I'm sure if we said,
They'd
hey,
want a
we were.
permanent facility if they
Absolutely,
could.
yeah.
Yeah, you want dedicated space because you don't want people getting hit with
Yeah,
frisbees.
but, I mean, you could let them try it for a year or two, and if it worked out, then maybe make it permanent.
That's a good, that's a good
Yeah, I
idea.
would
Some-
say, so if you've been through Ellison Park, it's not like you're restricted from walking through
Correct,
the
you can still
areas.
walk
It's-
through
It's
there.
pretty
They have it over
open,
there.
You'll
it's
get some
not,
dirty looks if you go through there
well,
in front of somebody.
you can give them dirty looks. But yeah, I don't think it's a dedicated, like, it doesn't preclude other uses.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, can we vote?
Okay.
So it's acceptable for
Yeah, it's a
consideration, I guess.
Vegetated buffers adjacent to property owners.
Yeah,
That's reasonable.
I think that's very reasonable.
Yeah.
Sure.
Can I ask a question? This
Yeah.
is kind of random. Well, not really, but it relates to the property. The trees that have been cut down, what is the plan for replacing all or any of them? Is there a plan?
There's not a
Will they
plan
be
at this time to
replaced?
do that. A lot of those trees were taken down, some were dead, some of them were causing some sight distance issues at the intersection.
Yeah, they were.
People were
That's the-
complaining about a lot.
Mhm,
As a matter of fact, I've gotten nothing but compliments from especially women, for some reason, who were very concerned about deer crossings at that
Deer, yeah.
location. So right now, I don't believe there's any intent on our part to do a landscaping plan. We may look at landscaping as time goes on. We still have dead trees along
Sure.
Wayland Road. You see them as you're out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're waiting for March to show up so that we get our windstorm, our annual windstorm, to see what kind of damage that's gonna cause. But at this point in time, I suspect what'll happen is we'll take all of your comments and recommendations. The town board will probably at some point in time take those, maybe incorporate all of them, maybe incorporate some of them, but then probably eventually do some kind of a plan for the entire property to see how things would lay out. For instance, if you're gonna do more trails, do the trails get widened out so you can do pedestrian and biking, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
So we may talk to somebody about doing a plan that would show all the components And some of that obviously would be landscaping, obviously.
So I have a follow-up question then. How many more trees are coming down that we know of right now? in
I
March?
asked that question last Wednesday of our DPW director. He still is taking down a few more, but not that many. And I don't think you're gonna see, I think you're gonna see some more along the roadway, because a lot of those are dead. If you sit there and look at each one of them, you'll know that a lot of them are dead. And I think there's like onesies and twosies throughout the back nine that might have to come down just for safety purposes, but you're not gonna see any more major cutting, I don't think.
What about some of the trees that are knocked down? Like there's one right behind my house and it's,
I think
like a
what'll happen is
danger.
maybe in the springtime when everything kind of gets, get accessibility, we'll back in. There's a lot of
Yeah.
laying on the front lines
Going on
now.
Atlantic
There's a lot of
They'll go
kids
in-
back
Yeah.
there
And there's
and
still
they
some
go back
stumps in
there
the
and
front
play
line.
and it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
So, the
They'll
sooner
probably
to
go
get
through,
those
do an
out, the
inventory
better.
and come back in and do it.
Are they gonna grind down all the stumps?
They're gonna pull them out.
Or
They've been
pull 'em
pulling them
out.
out this week.
They've
got a
Finally
bunch of
the
them out
machine
now.
back.
I
and
think the
they're pulling
machine
them out.
came back
Okay.
yesterday. So I think today they're out sorting out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maintaining a vegetated buffer
Yeah.
Yes.
seems reasonable.
And a lot of that being natural, I type of thing, isn't it? Kind of like,
I just want to, before I forget it, and I don't mean to break up the process here, but I want to go back just quickly, because since the last time we met, we did identify the fact that you really did not want to have, cultivated fields out there for athletic purposes. But what about the idea of like your kids maybe want to go out and throw a football or a soccer ball around themselves in the neighborhood and just go out there and, with no formal, field per se, but to have some place we could just go and, is there something that you'd like to do in that regard where you just have an open area that's just kind of mowed, but that's about all it is?
Yeah.
I think that would be good.
Yeah, just don't
definitely.
disallow it.
Just mow it.
I think you'd have areas around shelters if you had a shelter. What do you do at a shelter? Throw a frisbee?
pavilions or
Yeah.
picnic tables area.
Or if there are lacrosse fields or whatever, just a
Well, I
little
wasn't
extra
even
area.
thinking of that. I was just thinking maybe the kids,
Open space.
Even
there's
before
no
the
place for
field
kids to go. You got a park next to you, but you're not out there but to just go out and throw a ball around or something like that, not have to interfere with disc golf or whatever it is.
I'm thinking this vegetated buffer thing sort of applies to the houses along Harwood Circle and
Yeah,
Skyview.
that's what I'm thinking.
And that if you're going to have ball fields and activities out there, you ought to provide some buffer to give them a little privacy.
Yes, please. That's where I live.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I know that.
Didn't mean to sidetrack you. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
So that's a yes?
Yeah.
Driving range on the former back nine.
Did we talk
That was, I thought that was a no. We did talk about
We
it,
said
but
no,
we
I have
never
a no on
decided.
that.
Well,
I
we crossed
think-
off the executive 9-hole golf course.
Yeah, we
didn't
crossed off the nine.
No, somebody submitted a proposal.
Mr.
Yeah.
Sanders,
Yeah.
Yes.
do you want to hear from him?
Yeah, I think it,
I mean, we can bring
Yeah, I
them in
thought
at
we
the
were
next
gonna
meeting.
invite them in.
At least explain.
Yes.
yeah.
I'm sorry?
We were going to invite them in.
Yeah, we kind of just
Well,
want
we
to
were
finish
asking
going
for
through
your
the list
opinion
and
as to what
then.
you wanted, but we can bring him in if you'd like to just hear what the process is. We don't know any more about it than you do at this point in
And
time.
how much space does he want or need? You know,
What's
he
his
was gonna-
He
He was
the guy
Yeah, I
at
did.
Cheryl Pines that.
He was the pro that was there before, so he wants to do lessons and have driving range, but
I mean,
is
if
it
you're
just
talking
chipping?
Big
Is it-
Oak here, it's nuts.
It's a lot of space.
Yeah, it's a lot of space.
Well, that's what I want to find
Right.
out.
When they ask him, he may
And
say, I
big
want a little
big
chipping area.
fences
that,
if you took all the
you can
trees
practice
down.
putting and chipping and I need,
Right.
100 yards. I'm not talking about, people teeing up buckets of balls. It's a teaching area, or I don't know.
No, that's what a driving range is, so.
We can bring him in and
You want to do it undecided and have us bring him in for you, and then you can
Yeah.
make a
Sure,
decision after
okay,
that?
yeah, that's.
Yes.
Another bring-in, were we going to have somebody talk about mixed use trails? Nels
I think
Farm
Ross.
has-
they're still formulating their,
Yeah, they're doing some research right now with other towns and
Okay.
other parks that have done multi-use and, certainly if you look at
Rochester Trust
Yes.
Foundation.
Canal Trail, it's a wonderful multi-use. You can walk with little kids and tricycles and you can ride road bikes and up and down, all along the canal.
The canal, the
But at the
towpath,
same time, that's a pretty big piece of,
it's all paved.
and beautiful piece, yeah. So that's a big expensive project, so that's really, rather initially is, I
Yeah.
think the document that's in everybody's email the document from the Trails Committee to the town, to this committee actually, is that we have some separate pathways initially, and then if we had enough broad space, we could make a multi-use. Our list still says multi-use, and it says paths, not, you know, it probably needs a little enhancement as we go to the final stages, but yeah, there's a number of issues mixing the two that don't mix well.
And I say we can have the trails.
But I don't think at this point,
Provide a
Nels is planning to
document.
come in, or anybody, right away. I think that'll happen though
Yeah,
later.
the biggest thing is we asked that, after their last meeting, we asked for them to go back and sort of get some documentation from some other municipalities
Oh,
that
okay.
have multi-use trails in their parks and the pros and cons and how, so that way there, if they do come and present, they've got some data.
So, yeah,
that they can-
that's right, exactly. That's the idea of what we're planning to do, and
Yep.
rather than going halfway and say, well, we think this is the case.
Yeah, true, good.
Let's get some information. So that'll come, that may still come yet.
Okay.
So the driving range is,
We
Question.
left it as undecided, and
Undecided.
we'll invite the gentleman in to kind of talk with the group, and you can ask him questions and find a little bit more about it.
Mhm.
Snowshoeing,
Yeah.
Yeah, those-
motorsports,
it's already being done.
No.
orienteering course.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's pretty low.
Yeah, really.
yeah, very low.
Outdoor, indoor exhibits, including
Art.
art.
Art and sculpture,
That might be
Needs a building, doesn't it?
the indoor
Festival.
exhibits, yeah.
Well, that's a good
The
point.
lodge.
That might come under the heading of a festival type thing where you might have local artists coming for a
Yeah,
weekend.
Art
let's
exhibit.
say
Yeah.
acceptable, just say,
I don't think you want to have
No
a
permanent
building
fixtures.
dedicated to.
no, that's not.
I have a hunch,
Maybe that was related to the Clark House, that you
There
could
would-
have events in the Clark House at that point in
two
time.
people recommending, I have a hunch they were envisioning the Clark House
Yeah.
as the indoor part, yeah.
Okay.
And if that- and
No,
that's the-
No, I think it was, the email that I read seemed to be saying art in the park. I mean,
There are some
things along
outdoor,
the trails.
Put some art.
like, outside of Buffalo, there's Griffith,
The indoor
Griffith's
exhibits.
Oh,
Sculpture
the
Park.
indoor, oh, I think, yeah.
It's sort of an outdoor art exhibit, but you can walk around trails and
Sure.
interact
What are your
with
thoughts about it?
the things that are built out there,
What,
the art exhibit.
Having outdoor art throughout the park.
Like sculpture, you mean?
Like, yeah, so there's Griffith's Sculpture
or
Park out in
They might
Buffalo
do
that
something
is,
in wood or
you
something.
can interact with it, and people, while they're walking, can,
They're just there.
they're there, but a lot of them are interactive pieces that you can interact with as you're going around the park.
It's kind of like the exercise machines in North Palms Park. You walk around.
What's the, how
and
does
see
the
these things.
interaction piece work? You download an app?
Some of the things you can climb on or climb into, or
I
you move stuff
gotcha.
around and you
Yeah.
can see different perspectives.
I was envisioning
And-
these like
Um,
apps that were there.
Some of them are students, so when I was at UB doing architecture, we did architectural design things that you could actually go in and go inside of and see out of and look through the park and
Okay.
There's another park in Lewiston called the
Art park.
the art
Yeah.
park. Yeah.
similar, so they're bigger pieces, you know,
Yeah.
moderately sized pieces that you can go like into, onto, like you said, move around.
The things that they have over here, the little exercise components, does everybody know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
They have like,
Yeah.
I think those are pretty neat too
Yeah,
for
they're pretty
families
cool,
and
too, yeah.
kids and
You could even
for
put that on
older
a
people.
walking path.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
With the cat trail. The cat trail.
Okay.
That's a good point. We
You know we have,
Yeah.
Rothfuss has one to go back to what you were
Exactly,
saying about with the
that's-
app.
Right.
At Rothfuss, as you walk along the trail, there's a station and you just use your phone, scan an app. It gives you an exercise to
Tells you
do.
what to do.
I did
Yeah,
not
yeah,
know
yeah.
that.
There you go.
Yeah, that's
Learn
cool.
something new every day.
Cool.
So.
You want to throw that back up to the top where you have multi-use paths, walk, run, casual,
Yeah.
cycling,
But outdoor.
exercise path?
So we're good with art and we're good with exercise equipment?
Yeah,
Well, are you good with art both indoor and outdoor?
Outdoor?
I don't know about indoor.
Outdoor.
Outdoor. Yeah.
Okay.
Outdoors.
Because we don't have an indoor.
Yeah.
Exactly. Moment. That's where you get a lot
Outside of
over
the
there.
indoor area.
Okay.
If we did end up with a lodge, we could do art pieces, you know, painting pieces.
Yeah.
But not, we're not gonna build a building for art.
No.
Right.
A graffiti wall.
That might happen.
That's gonna happen
I'm
naturally.
sorry, no.
Well, I can't remember, is the outbuilding next to the clock house, the big outbuilding, is that part of our mandate, or is that all?
No,
It's within the.
No, but
gonna ask.
what's gonna happen is fairly soon, the town board's gonna have the RFP ready to go out.
Yeah.
They're having its final review now.
But, all right, well, it's not for us, it's not.
No, it's not, but
Yeah.
we promised you that you would actually, know who's made their submittals, so you have a feel for what's going on there. I mean, it'll probably happen after the report is done, but at least you'll have a feeling for what's going on there and see how it interacts with what you're doing.
I'm sorry, Jim, did you say that the RFP has gone out? Or
No,
it has not
it's
yet?
in its
Okay.
final review right now, and I intended to go out, I'm hoping,
We haven't
the
even
second
seen
week.
it.
No, maybe around the second week of February or third week of February.
Okay.
You'll see it probably before we're done with this process.
And it's not up for sale, it's just for
No,
use.
no, it's
Just
not
for
for
use.
sale.
it includes the barn and the outbuilding.
It does, but you have to,
The barn.
the barn and the cart house are actually secondary or ancillary to the Clark House. We're not gonna let those get rented out and then have the Clark House sitting there vacant.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay. Mhm.
Next item's the pump track, which I don't know if that ties in or segues with mountain biking, and we had mountain biking as undecided, or at least I had that last time of,
Yeah, we had a big discussion
Should
about
we
all that. last
fold
time.
that in, or is that separate?
I
from
think
I think
what
it's
you guys have in
separate.
I
mind?
think it can be separate, and I heard maybe opposition to the
Yeah,
idea.
I think that,
At least at first.
it may be proposed later or something, but,
Well,
for right now,
I-
I'd say no.
If we're bringing people in, I think that Rock is a good, the Genesee Regional Off-Road Cyclists, good group to bring in. They can talk about that and we can make a final decision, but I think that there was opposition to the idea of a
Yes.
pump
Yeah.
track.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's a no?
Similar to.
Do you want us to bring them in
Yeah, I
regardless?
agree.
Hmm?
Do you want us to bring them in regardless?
I think Rec should come in and perhaps integrate ideas with the Trails
Integrate the Trails
Committee,
Committee?
you know, not that, to see what could or couldn't happen with multi-use trails.
Well, as I remember the
Enough.
discussion we had of the pump track, wasn't it have big walls? Yeah.
It was a single-purpose function, and I
Yeah,
think we had said that that's
And not how
basically,
the other thing.
the opposition was that, yeah.
And it wasn't aesthetically very pleasing.
No.
I vote no on the pump track.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
where are we with bringing in Grok?
But bringing in Grok and maybe at the same time the Trails Committee come in would not be a
Yeah.
bad
Yeah.
mix.
I
You know,
think
if that
for
works out,
multi-use and all-
we could,
Yeah,
Chris could coordinate that with Grok.
yeah.
I mean, Eric
Okay.
Metzler can help with that communication.
Sure.
Okay.
But for right now,
didn't
Trump
make
pump
it.
track is a.
He didn't
is a
make
no.
it.
Didn't make it, right.
So no.
Next one, residential development retirement community, that one's off the boards
Probably
already,
no.
so.
Yeah.
Nope.
Very.
Rope course, zip line,
It'd be fun, but I don't know what you
This
do.
is like a
with
pretty
it.
big
Like,
function.
I mean, a
building
zip
and
line
all that.
that
They do have
requires,
a
It's still there.
Yeah.
high school.
like,
Be trained.
Just have behind-
well, not just be trained,
Trails,
staff,
they're
let
taking
them
a lot
run
of
it up,
that
yeah,
now.
they
It's
have
all down
staff.
at Penfield.
Yeah.
They've got them one
They
at
moved it to the high
Oh, did they? I
school.
didn't see
Yeah.
that.
So that's
I'm sorry, Chris?
incredibly-
Where is it?
Yeah,
Back by the
By the
tennis courts.
courts.
What is it,
Yeah.
tennis course?
It's very nice. There's a rock wall.
back.
I want to use it, honestly. Can you?
There used to be one at Bay Trail, but that's gone.
It's gone. Just go.
Because you can't get up. They're like ladders that don't exist until until they're
BYOL.
So what's rope course then, no?
You're saying no now?
I think it would
Yeah.
require
It requires
additional
staff,
much
it requires
stuff.
management, it requires too much,
Right.
Insurance.
yeah.
Yeah, everything.
Can I make one quick suggestion though? I'm thinking, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but there's a beautiful, tiny zip line at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. My daughter used to live across the street from it.
Really?
And it's for little kids.
Hmm.
And it would fit in nicely with the playground. Yes.
Oh,
So, I don't know, we might suggest a little one as part of the playground.
Just not something you needed a harness and staff and safety stuff
Right.
for.
I bet you
Just hang
do.
on and.
No, No, you just grab it like any zip line. But it's small, it's maybe go from, I don't know.
Do you have access to
Hand
the
on the
photographs
wall
or
with
anything where we can take a look at it?
What, and the one, and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Any
Well, I don't know, can we, Doug, can you raise the that kind of thing on that?
Yeah, I can just look it up here.
Yeah, that's a good idea, maybe in a playground or something. Okay.
I don't know a lot about playgrounds, but there's one over at Highland near
Beautiful.
St. John's that is really intriguing, really nicely done.
And also, it's similar
Oh, here
to
it
the
is.
Abraham Lincoln,
No.
the natural logs
That's
Right,
the only
right.
now.
in,
Yeah.
out on.
Yeah.
That's good.
He's done.
Yes.
You know those trees we took down?
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of
All
cool.
those lawns?
It's cute.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that would just be.
Oh, that would be real.
I think I have a
Seat to sit on if you're part of it.
Stokey has a very similar one. Stokey Farms has one just like that.
They do?
Yeah, theirs is a little bit longer and higher,
So
but
that would
this,
be
it's a very small.
Part of a
zip line.
playground installation
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
down in the woods.
Right.
That's
Georgia. Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Add it,
That one
add it to
was
the
the
playground line and we say,
Safer.
let's try it. Sounds like fun.
It's technically very nice, but I'm just dealing with anything else.
Yeah,
I could see like a small rope course and a zip line as part of a playground area.
yeah, as long as it's kept small, I think that's
Yeah.
a big part of it, not, mhm.
Okay. So we'll say kids version possibly with a
Yeah,
playground.
kid version.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
good idea.
Yeah,
We
real
already have some.
real good.
Cemetery?
No,
There's one there already.
Yeah.
don't want to see that.
Big
No way.
Next, community garden.
Community garden.
What's required for
Nice
that?
idea.
Oh, don't we
There's
have
one
one?
on-
Oh, there is.
We have
but
one.
We have a 5 mile in,
5 mile line.
Yeah.
Just south of maybe McLaren's house there.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it
Is
at
that
capacity?
oversubscribed?
It
I
is.
think
Oh,
there's
it
a
is.
demand-
Actually, it is.
There's a demand for it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Last year, they actually did create a wait list for it.
Really?
Yeah, they are in, there is some space, as you can see, behind it. There is thought that they may, obviously,
Expand.
they'll just have to remove the
Push back.
fencing on the back end.
Yeah.
and,
I'd go that way then.
Rent a plot,
Yep, a lot of people rent multiple, but yep, you can kind of see how they're,
bring their own
Nets.
fertilizer and everything.
everything's all on their
Water?
own.
Yeah.
Water is supplied by the town.
It is.
Oh, it's all there?
It is.
Okay.
And
There's a hydrant at the road.
You got a spigot or
Yeah.
whatever, I mean,
Yeah, there's a hydrant
not
at the road that
irrigated
we
here.
turn on, and then there's a hose that goes underground and it comes up and, so people can have access to it.
Okay.
It's great.
Sweet.
I think it would be good to expand that first before we did anything over at the Shadow Pines
You
area.
want to make that the recommendation?
Yeah,
And
right.
first before-
Mhm.
Yeah, can you-
So you may want to look at that on a lot of.
Yeah, if you run that
That's
out,
good.
sure,
Yep,
why
I
not?
think that's a good answer. Great.
I think it's fitting.
For this project, no.
Oh, that's right up against Windsor Square.
Yeah, it is.
conservatory?
No.
No.
Soapbox derby? I think we might have talked about that already.
I think that was a
I
no.
think that was a no.
Yeah, he's going to Webster.
Oh, is he?
Yep.
Oh, he is? Good.
Secured parking lot.
Tennis courts.
Tennis courts?
Tennis courts.
And you said volleyball courts too, which
Yeah, what I added to that whole list was tennis courts, pickleball, volleyball, croquet, horseshoes, bocce, anything, you know, add some things in here that could be considered, that wouldn't be taking up a lot of space, and they,
If there's a demand, I've seen the ones at the high
not
school.
that we're saying do it, not that we're
unused.
saying fund it, just,
Is there,
What do
you
you
see
got,
a demand
Chris?
for tennis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even more so,
Pickleball,
I'd
huge.
probably lean towards pickleball. If you're
Yeah,
gonna,
that's
obviously, they
packed.
can be dual purpose.
sure.
But to go to your comment about the high school, we actually permitted last year, we permitted 3 nights a week, our own internal program that we ran our programs out of, and the other nights
I
they
guess
were
I've been there in the
USTA. went in.
daytime walking
Yeah,
dogs.
USTA was,
Yeah.
I mean, on a Monday, at,
Right.
you know, during the school year, if they're not in a tennis session, they sit vacant, but definitely pickleball courts would be something that, you know, from that venue that you would,
So that would be the same.
Strongly
same
consider.
thing, Pickleball.
I don't know how that played out in this, but that was one of the highest comments that we received in our survey.
So that's a yes?
I don't know, what's the group's consensus on
I don't
that?
know.
where are we guessing tennis courts as pickleball?
I don't know, what needs paving?
I was saying tennis courts, pickleball, volleyball.
Where else do we have tennis courts? Do we have that?
Paris, well, we have the courts here. We have
Yeah, there's some.
for tennis courts, we have them here, Veterans Memorial, and Greenwood. Greenwood is actually dual purpose.
Yeah, Greenwood is measured out for pickleball as
Correct.
well as tennis.
That's our only outdoor
Yep.
pickleball
Okay.
courts.
Got it.
I think it sounds like a viable thing. It
Yep.
fits within the recreation.
It's
Team.
small.
But volleyball, are you thinking like a sand volleyball?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I don't know, it was one of the things mentioned, and I just said, could throw all them into one big bucket and say, maybe yes,
Especially like
maybe
if you
no.
had near a lodge, I could see like sand volleyball, bocce, those kinds of things.
I'd see it in conjunction with the lacrosse and soccer fields also. Part of that complex space.
We have consensus on this one?
So what about the tennis courts? That requires paving.
You know, tennis court, now I think about a difference, because it needs
Well, pickleball would be paved too.
extensive paving and big fence,
Oh, yes,
and the other things don't.
yep.
You know, yeah.
Tennis and pickleball are basically, consider them the same piece.
You're gonna do one.
If you're gonna do one,
If you're gonna
if
build
you're
a new
doing
one,
both,
you're
it's just a
gonna
matter of
build-
striping it differently, so.
Pickleball music. What do you hit with pickleball?
It's a paddle,
Like a big, yeah.
And then you
wood
hit
paddle.
a ball?
it's a
Yeah.
wiffle ball.
It's kind of a big wiffle
It's a
ball.
wiffle ball?
Yep.
So you don't need fencing if it was pickleball specific.
You
but
don't
why
have
make-
to.
But why make a pickleball court without also making a dual purpose?
Yeah.
Some places do. Greece actually did. Greece took a battery of tennis courts and turned them into strictly pickleball. If you look at if you look at Greenwood, we're actually considering putting a pickleball court on the pad outside of the tennis courts, just because we have what used to be an old kick wall there. We're thinking about putting, and we're hoping to do it. It's up a little higher, right there.
Yeah.
We're gonna put a pickleball only court there. Obviously, it won't have fencing.
Yeah.
The only reason that we're not putting fencing is because we're just gonna use the existing space that's there.
Yeah.
If you're building something from
You would
scratch,
put
you would want it.
Is it the same lines as the tennis court?
For
No,
pickleball,
you see the lines different.
Oh, okay.
you can actually see there's two people playing pickleball on the one
Oh.
side.
Is there an opportunity to build more courts to the west here?
You could go a little further out. Again, don't quote me if there's anything out there from a drainage standpoint. I really don't know, but you could go further out that way. The other issue you run into again there is we did expand the parking lot, so parking is the issue, and there's no restrooms at that spot.
Yeah, yeah.
I've
There's
been
a,
there.
there's a set of porta-johns, but that's done by Penfield Youth
Penfield
Lacrosse, so
Lacrosse.
that's there during their season.
It's seasonal.
Exactly. True.
Seasonal.
Hold it the rest of the year, folks.
Seasonal basketball.
Need a fence?
Again, ideally, yes, you do. You want to be able to have it controlled in a space.
The ball, you don't have to go 40 yards to get your
Correct.
ball back.
Right. It doesn't need to go 40 yards, maybe 10.
Yeah, it'll be lucky to go that far.
It's a windy day.
Not like tennis.
There's synergies between these things and a lodge, that it would, I think, if you're gonna have like a big gathering or a party, many people might want to go off and play tennis, or go off and play volleyball or pickleball or whatever.
Something is dropped right in front of you.
Oh, thank you.
So for that reason, I think that it fits.
Change tennis to pickle.
No, if you're gonna do a pickleball field or court, I would do it as part of a tennis court, 'cause then you get both advantages.
Synergy.
What's the rest of the group? I don't think we have any issues with
Wouldn't mind pickle.
volleyball and bocce. Do you want to say tennis and pickleball, maximize other facilities, but you're not opposed to it?
I'd say.
Yeah,
You can maximize
Yeah.
what at Greenwood or something first, but it's not,
if there's really a demand and they
It's not on the
can't
no
fill
list,
it
but it's-
elsewhere.
and then volleyball, bocce, other non-fenced hard surface.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Tennis, pickleball.
Do we have any bocce courts?
We
Yeah,
do.
or two.
up at the top of
Oh,
Harris
really?
Dam.
They're actually very nice.
One of the finest
they're real
bocce courts in Monroe County.
They're very nice.
Are they
were just-
really?
They were
Really
just
nice.
redone by
Play.
Rotary 2 or 3 years ago.
Huh.
Seniors off of them.
And actually Wegman staff did the work for it.
Look at those courts.
They're nice
Yeah,
set
they're
of courts.
beautiful.
They
No
play
idea.
on, there's a
I
group
have no
that meets
idea.
there on Mondays.
What's the surface?
That is gravel,
Yeah.
which is what it's, there's a group that
Right up
meets
there
there
at
on
the corner.
Mondays.
It's a
That
stone
will
dust.
blow you away. They are there every Monday.
I'm
during
gonna
the
bring my
summer.
bocce set and I'm gonna go play.
And they are the nicest group of people you'll ever
They're
encounter.
nice
I
courts.
prefer playing bocce
Well, like
in
on the side of a hill in a yard and
Get
a
all
little
these
challenge
different
to it.
rules.
There's actually, we put
The
a,
backyard stuff.
On the back lawn.
nice
Not more
Gravel,
challenge.
also little.
Hills down there.
They're so small, they don't take up much
Is there, are
space.
there any leagues or anything?
the group that plays there on Monday night is a league.
Okay.
It's been in existence since
Well,
those courts.
they helped build it, I think.
Yeah, since those courts have been there, and they continue to stay on. It's more of a social group.
Yeah.
I mean,
Now they're
they're
more
there
serious.
every Monday during the summer, and like I said, just a great use of it.
Yeah.
And for people that use, to go back to your point earlier, the people that use that open pavilion, it's a nice amenity to have
Right.
right on the other side of the parking lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I like
So
that.
you can go through Tuesday through Sunday.
Sweet. There.
Tell you, go on a Monday, they're fun to do.
Any other suggestions, thoughts this group had, wants to add?
I wanted to mention something. As you are driving along Whalen Road and you look at the Clark House over here and the old cart house, looking straight at that cart house, it is a beautiful building. It's not just a cart house. And it just boggles my mind that that would be included when we are, as your representative, I can't, Erpich, what's his first name? Andy mentioned last week that the lodges are gone like at 90 minutes. It just boggles my mind that we would throw that in with the cart house and the barn when there is an existing structure that could be modified.
Well, you gotta also remember that, you're right, it could be,
It's
it could actually be
beautiful,
it could be two shelters.
Yeah, actually, couldn't,
But you gotta
yeah.
also remember that the town board reserves the right to reject any and all bids.
I understand that.
So, I mean, they might decide at some point in time, maybe that's what they wanna do it, and we may not get somebody who's interested in it for one reason or another, you know?
But I would just like that opinion so noted. It is a beautiful building when you look at it, and
Yeah.
it could be more, made to be more beautiful like some of the other lodges.
That's a
And,
good point.
you know, whatever.
We talked about lodges, so
Yeah.
that might be a recommendation.
I was amazed when Andy said that they were all gone in that short of a time.
Oh, every year.
It's been
He
like
said
that for a
90
long
minutes,
time.
he was generous, usually it's about an hour.
30 minutes. They're killing each other trying to get to.
It was on the list, Mark, at one time it was on the list, wasn't there some camping that Tom was talked about? I didn't recall seeing that.
Some of the Boy Scout troops are interested in some space, Penfield Boy Scout troops, for potential camping
Yeah, I heard some camping rumors
Yeah.
somewhere, I don't know where.
It has not escalated to any more discussion than that.
Good.
And Chuck Fox was the one that raised that to me.
Well, what are your thoughts on that? Well, that's kind of interesting.
Sounds a good idea to me. What about campfires?
We didn't even get into that level of, I told him that he should come here or present it to this committee. You know, obviously he
Wanna bring
hasn't
him in?
at this point, but I would suspect that it would include, a Friday night or Saturday night camp out and probably some form of a fire pit.
So we want to probably prepare those fire pit locations, I would guess.
Yeah.
What about things like just having picnic tables scattered throughout?
yeah.
With the
Yeah,
grills?
sure. See.
Are we comfortable with that?
Yeah.
But we said pavilions up above with
Yeah.
picnic tables, I think we yes that.
Well, I'm not even thinking picnic, I'm not even thinking of the pavilion in this case, but you might have a really
Random
nice
tables.
overlook area that you might want to do.
I assume that applied to both.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody's good? Everybody-
As long as there's restrooms.
Picnic tables. Would you provide a
They are for
grill?
us.
Would you provide grills with the picnic tables?
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Would you provide grills with the picnic
Yes,
tables?
that was my question. I'm comfortable with that.
Should have a Duran, there's a lot of picnic tables with just a standalone grill next to it, and people have different spots.
Okay.
What about selling memorials? for picnic tables or benches.
Yeah,
That's a
I
great
like
idea.
that.
Sounds like a
Great way to raise
recommendation
money.
to me.
Brick
Put name
sidewalk
tags,
would be
put
Yeah.
name tags on them.
You could also do that with lodges or,
Yeah.
How about
Boy
having
Scouts
Eagle
could build
Scouts
them.
build?
We got Eagle Scout projects.
Trail committee does it all the time.
Yeah,
They
you guys do a ton of
wonderful-
stuff with the Eagles. Yeah, it's
Wonderful
fun.
relationship with them.
We've generated a lot of Eagle Scouts
Some of the benches
together.
at Harris Wayland,
I was-
there were a couple that had.
I was thinking of Jim Britt's bench.
Yeah, Jim Britt.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly, that's what Beth was just
Yes,
talking about.
you're right, because Ann Britt's
Ann
name is
Britt's.
that one.
Mhm. I think that's it.
Anything else we haven't mentioned or hasn't been thrown out there that somebody's thought about?
Did
or
we
is
talk
it-
about the rent existing structures and all that kind of stuff at the bottom?
I mean, that's where, I mean, the Clark House is currently up for
That's
RFP
it.
on that. I mean, that includes the cart house and then the barn across
Okay.
the street. As Jim said, the main purpose is to rent the Clark House first and foremost. And then if whoever rents the Clark House doesn't want those two other structures, we'd look at, you know, are those viable options for somebody else to rent? Or if they say, no, I want the Clark House and I need the other buildings as storage for materials, obviously the town board would vet that out. So
Improvement to access. I'm curious, I do recall when the, golly, what is that little subdivision off of? God,
Harwood?
It borders Harris Wayland Park, the little cul-de-sac that was built.
Hidden Meadow?
Hidden Meadow. When that was being built, I know my husband came to a meeting and said, we who live right in the shallows of that have no access to that park except to drive or bike or walk, you know, like a mile and a half. And therefore, the town provided that little access
path.
trail. Is there any possibility, like for Trish, she was talking about how she can't get to anything. Is there some way of making access, like, I don't know what you'd do if you would have to,
I mean,
You know,
there's this dead-end stub at the end of Harwood that was always intended to be a road access. I mean, you could obviously have a sidewalk or a path off of that.
Some places like that.
That would open it up to
Yeah.
Harwood,
We
yeah.
own this, it's a strip of land still owned by the town. At some
Oh.
point in time, they were looking at whether that did connect through or, you know, was a street with it. Obviously, depending on what's nearby and
But there's
what's,
a cut through at Greenwood as well, just on the other side
Yep.
of,
Yeah.
yeah.
is there anything near
There's
you,
a cut
Tricia,
through.
that,
Yeah, I think that's great.
just, you know, at the end of the property, it gets pretty close to where I am, or even like Huntington Meadow, if they just had to cross the street into a area that could access the park without spending too much time on Clark.
There was also a discussion about some kind of entrance along access road, access path along Atlantic Avenue and the Scribner Wayland sort of corner, because other than
Yeah.
driving
Oh, yeah,
around
yeah.
from
They have the
Atlantic
same
Avenue, you don't have any way to get into Shadow Pines. So there was this, I remember somebody, I think it was my neighbor John, as a matter of fact, that had a discussion about putting an access path
Like
right along that corner
pedestrian or
area.
bicycle.
You,
Right, entrance way to, you know,
Walk,
just be able to
bike,
walk
anything.
through, bike, whatever, along that corner of Atlantic and Wayland.
make it more
Yeah.
Kind
immediate?
of a number of
Would you
spikes around the thing that would just come
Yeah,
into the park
just
would
make
be
Yeah.
kind of a neat idea.
buttons at the intersection to operate the traffic light so you can cross Atlantic safely.
Well, I mean, people are doing it, I think there
There are
are,
pedestrian
yeah, there's already
services.
pedestrian buttons there.
Are they there?
Yeah, they
Yes,
are
going to
there,
the school.
they are there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are kids that actually.
But I mean, like, we
Tree
have-
Brook that cross the street, they cross Atlantic
Yeah.
Avenue, walk down, and then cross Scribner.
Right.
then-
And I've seen runners that like run down Atlantic Ave and run into the property, but they don't really have a good way of getting in there. They need to go through the trees and cut through all that to get in,
And
so.
there will be, you know, that's a very good point, there should be a defined area to get into the
Yeah.
park. There will also be eventually, as we start
Signage.
developing, a signage to identify
Right,
just
sure,
where you
sure.
are, how to get in. And that could be adjacent to that access point that you're talking about to the park.
I think there also needs to be one across from Huntington Meadow.
Yeah.
Seems logical.
Yeah, right across from the stop sign there.
Yeah.
Keep going, Yep.
And there will be sidewalks on Huntington Meadow in the near future.
There will be.
Oh, is that right? You're gonna
2020,
do
I
it?
think, we're looking at doing it.
Oh, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, we've got
It
to
is.
set dollars, because it's gonna be about $250,000.
Oh, wow. So it's gonna be done.
But they do need sidewalks.
And we got a plan for it.
It's dangerous to walk on that street.
The bumpy road.
Like real sidewalks or just asphalt?
Real.
No, they'll be ADA compliant sidewalks.
Okay.
And how about Clark Road then?
That may come after. Let's see, we received a petition from, actually some middle school students came to the town board with a petition, everybody in Huntington Meadow.
One side.
Got signatures from every resident on the street, decided which side of the street, so they came and presented earlier this fall to the town board and said, we'd like sidewalks on
Activated.
Huntington Meadow, so the town board gave us the directive to go ahead and get that surveyed and start the design for it. We still gotta find where the dollars are coming from, but at least that's gotten the progress going, so. If Clark Road, obviously this property is new to us, so before, you had limited access to the golf course. They don't want somebody
Right.
accessing off of Clark Road or accessing the Huntington Meadows, so there wasn't a drive to get anything to this location. Now that it's gonna be a park and it's gonna have all the amenities there, obviously now we look at what's around it and start focusing on pedestrian access to it. Some of the easy ones, if you have an access off of Hardwood, you can come in from there. If you have an access off of Atlantic Avenue, you can have a pedestrian walker path in there. Huntington Meadows, we can start looking at other spots. Now this is going to become a destination point that people want to get to.
You talking about access, there is a concern about crossing Clark Road from A to B.
You'd have to put in striped
One of those-
crosswalks and
What about one of these type of pedestrian activated lights that you see on college campuses, that you see in Canandaigua? You hit the button, the lights go on in the street? I mean,
But if you live next to them, you might not want that.
well, nobody is right next to that one. But if you put it in the place where you have the crossing right now, I mean, that would be ideal for,
we do have some that are already slated to come in. We've got 2 on Baird Road that are going to be installed hopefully later this fall by the community center. And then the crossing where the students cross now, coming from the neighborhood from the north, we've got 2 there. We've got 1 slated for Liberty Street, where that connects into down in the Four Corners. And then south of the Four Corners, down by Rosie's in that area, there's a crosswalk
okay.
there. And we've got ped indicators that's done by the county. There was a
but they
grant-
are the pedestrian activated lit ones.
Yep,
Okay,
and those
nice.
we got those through a grant. The county, Bear Road's not a county road, but since they got the grant, they're actually doing the facilitation of having those installed.
They were
Very
wonderful.
nice.
So that should be
They are
coming
really
in fall of this year for those. So yes, that's an option. Obviously, we wouldn't put it in place until you get a sidewalk, until you get a crosswalk and something at that location. But once you put a sidewalk to that spot and you're directing people to that area, obviously then you need to look at the pedestrian safety in there.
They're awesome.
Mark, do we have enough water to take care of ball fields? I know the golf course would get their water from the quarry, but
There is water all the way around the property, so the Monroe County Water Authority would,
okay,
Yep.
you just have to pay for it. You wouldn't get it for free.
yeah, they get it for free. They get it for free. Obviously, we'd have to pay the rate for it, but yes, there is water all the way around the property. Any other suggestions? We've got our list. Any other groups we want to bring in? I've got notes to bring in the driving range professional, bring in Grok to talk about biking.
I think the RxCSF, the Cross Country
Cross
Ski
Country.
Foundation,
Yeah,
and maybe at the same time also bring in the high school, because I know
They
the
should be
high
joint.
school's now
Right.
Coach,
beginning grooming.
They've started
right?
grooming.
So, to talk about, can the high school do everything? Or do we need to have something like RxF,
Yeah.
whatever, Community Ski Foundation? I can't say it.
Yeah, the cross.
Some of that stuff, we were looking at uses, if you're okay with the use of cross-country skiing, I think Recreation and their program can figure out how to handle that and how it's
Okay.
We
done.
don't have to
So we
worry
can
about
say cross-country skiing.
We're supportive of cross-country skiing,
And
we're
then-
fine with it.
Go ahead.
We were looking at the undecideds, if we're not decided about an option, we could kind of come in and
Okay.
give us some give and take
Okay.
on that.
I would
If
say
you're
yes.
okay with it, then yes, we're good with cross-country skiing. then
Thank you, Chris.
Recreation,
Okay, yeah.
we'll work with whatever group.
Yeah, I mean,
And we don't care if they do it on the front nine or the back nine.
No.
I have a continuing concern though about the entire property in the residential zoning. And talking about bringing in somebody to discuss it next one. I'd like to know the pros and cons of possible rezoning.
Well, while we own it, it's
We own it, it doesn't
never
mean
gonna-
anything now.
It's never going to be anything
The
else.
zoning means nothing now, because we own it.
Well, I know, but
This property here is
You're
zoned
talking about
residential.
the area
what if a
surrounding?
town board's elected 20 years from now and decide they want to put in the subdivision?
I see what you're
I
saying.
mean, that's gonna be the public's decision, I would think, not just the town board's.
I mean, once,
Well, yeah, but if
Big
it's
time,
zoned
I would think,
first,
especially in
Oh,
20
I
years,
see what you mean.
you still won't have it paid off in 20 years.
yeah,
You
I
know?
mean, as Jim said, this property is zoned residential right now.
yeah, and I know
Property
that.
is?
Yeah.
This property,
really.
All the town properties.
every
are
property has
zoned
zoning to it. So I mean, it's zoned residential here. Rothfuss Park is residential zoning. Sherwood Park is residential zoning. So I mean, they're not zoned anything different, but while the town owns them, I mean, the town board is,
Zoning is a material.
Let me rephrase that then. Is there some vehicle we can use to assure that the property will remain in this kind of recreational use,
Looking into it.
pristine.
Steve, versus what kind of a use would you be concerned about if the town were to do something
I
different?
don't know, somebody comes back and wants to put in a retirement community and they're.
Oh, you can't, because the bonding and the resolution
That's right, there's
won't allow
too
it.
many restrictions in the resolutions and in the bonding under the state requirements. You couldn't do that now. You just couldn't do that.
All right, nobody, okay.
Yeah, it'd be like us saying, well, we're gonna develop a senior housing tract out here and back and get rid of our fields. You can't do that stuff. I mean, nobody out of 36,000 people who are all supportive of a park is gonna allow that to happen, and no town board member in their right mind would allow that to happen.
Well, I hope not.
Well, didn't the bonding resolution, is a
Set
part of it
controls
that was
on it.
voted on, set the controls for the next 30 years?
Well, 30 years. I don't think they're.
That should be just about right for all of us. I think. I'm not gonna worry about it. 31 years from now.
Speak for yourself.
Very good.
Remind me, it's a 30-year bond, right? Okay.
The other question, I guess, that we left, and since Steve went to the zoning, was the for sale naming rights issue. Is there, I don't know how that even got on the list, but
Well, I don't think the property
Yeah, what was
will
that?
ever be for sale at this point.
Oh, you're just talking about the
I'm
park.
saying naming
Put a
rights,
name on the
other
pond.
than
But it's not
Shadow
a park.
Pines, which I
So
think,
Bob wants to donate
A nice name.
$10,000 to call it Peterson
I was
Park.
going to say million.
yeah, that's what I meant, exactly.
4 million?
Foundation.
4 million.
Well, I guess the question would be, and I kind of thought about this since we bought it, how important is the name Shadow Pines?
Why
I
would we
think-
change it?
I don't
I
know.
think it's beautiful.
I think.
Yeah,
I think people like.
I think it's very important. I think it's got a
I
very
mean, I don't know if you
historical-
want to or not. I mean, I personally don't care. I could leave it the way it is, but
Exactly.
As long as
I
there's
just
pine
want to
trees
make
on
sure
the
that we weren't
property.
talking about
I think a Jennifer.
$4,000
Yeah,
or
right.
$4 million.
I don't think we do anything for 4,000.
We don't even meet for
4 million, we
Doesn't buy
might
a
talk,
bunch.
but 4,000, I don't think so.
I don't think there's any desire to rename Shadow Pines, anything else but Shadow Pines.
Great.
So Jim, when the town puts a sign up, it's just gonna say Shadow Pines. It's not gonna say Shadow Pines Park.
Yeah, right.
This is-
It's just
Well, it
gonna say
might.
Shadow
I don't know.
Pines, right?
It might.
We had to
Yeah,
I think
be careful about that.
It's not a park. It's not a park.
We didn't want it designated as
You look at this, all the signs we have all over town for this park here, for Veterans Park, for Greenwood Park. I mean, that's the kind of a theme that we've been doing with all of our parks, so I would say that we probably follow that theme.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Shadow
Good.
Pines it is.
Good job, you guys.
Okay, so we've got a list.
Welcome signage, I guess.
Everybody
That's
happy
nice.
with the list we have?
Yeah, that makes sense.
We'll clean it up for you and get to the
Yeah.
final ones that you like.
Yeah.
And then we'll get the people in to talk to you about the ones you want to talk to. then we'll finalize our decisions on the undecided, and then we'll start preparing a final, we'll get you together and start breaking up the ones you're interested in. Maybe some of you get 3 or 4, maybe some of you get 1 or 2, depending on how much work has to be done on that. And we'll start preparing a final document that we can cohesively put together into one form and get to the board.
So,
This
We
is very
had
effective.
we had a couple of undecideds. One was mountain biking. We're leaving that open till we hear from Brock, I guess. The other undecided was the off-leash dog park.
The
Could we
dog park,
resolve that
yeah.
one tonight?
And then we had that driving range issue too with
And the
that
driving
guy.
range.
we said we're gonna bring him in. Yeah, I guess we wanna circle back to
What do we need to make a decision on the dog park?
consensus.
Or, I mean,
Do you want
we
somebody
need
to
more
come in and,
information.
do you want somebody that did the dog park at the county down at Ellison to come in and talk to you?
Yeah, if we can, it would be great.
We could probably have someone from county parks come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put it
So
all
you say there's a
over.
demand for it,
That's
or
all
if there's...
fenced and whatnot though, right?
Yeah, and as a dog owner, I'm opposed to it
I'm opposed
because
to
Well,
it
that's
too.
okay.
the dogs fight and they get sick.
I'm opposed to it just because of the fencing.
And I thought we
Well, if
were
that's the
opposed
case,
to
do
it
you want to
except
talk about it now? and see what you got?
Eric Metzler, who's not here tonight, said something about he was for it because it kept the dogs off the trails.
Yeah, that's right, he did.
Oh, yeah, people walking the trails leave their
Yeah,
dogs.
yeah.
But can you leave your dog unattended like that?
No, you're not
No,
supposed to be
you're not
off
supposed to.
leash, but he said you get out of sight and they let their dogs loose, and it's a
Yeah.
problem for the hikers and bikers.
Certainly isn't Webster
But
Park.
I don't think a fenced-in
I don't think
off-leash,
that's gonna prevent.
I don't think,
people
that-
doing
right,
it.
I don't think that's the answer, so let's just say that's a no,
Abusers are
Yeah.
abused.
if everybody agrees.
Whatever you say.
I'm,
Yeah.
I can
know.
support or no.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't have a
All
dog.
right.
great.
I'm dogless over here, so, yeah, no.
Great.
Beth, do you use a dog park at all?
No.
I use one, and I think they're great when we have them. And we have a dog park rather close
Keep in
to
mind.
here, including the county one.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's the Farrington one, off Whitney Road.
Which is the closest one, Steve? Ellison Park?
Ellison Park.
Ellison Park, yeah,
This-
Ellison Park.
Yeah, this was,
So it's really redundant to have a third one.
Do you use the one at Ellison, Steve?
Hmm?
Do you use the one at Ellison Park?
I have used that one, and lately I've been going to the one in Farrington.
Okay.
I use the one at Ellison.
Do you?
Yeah, what's your experience?
Mostly good. There's been a couple times, well, once where a dog went after my dog. And then I'm always worried about him drinking the water in the pond.
Yeah, that's all.
You know, because it's just, I mean, they try to keep it moving, but it's just disgusting. I keep worrying he's gonna get really sick, but he loves it there, so. But I think most people, if they bring their dogs to this park, they'll probably take them on the trails anyway, I would think.
again, I guess on the trails, it's, all animals are leashed, I presume, or
That's
expected to be,
They should be
whether they are or
leashed.
not.
And the poop bag.
Yes, right, and the
Clean up their
disposable bags
supplies.
that
Yeah.
are along the park
From
trails.
the carry
Actually,
out supply
the-
area.
Can we, yeah, what about, sorry.
The poop bag thing, I know there's one at the start. Maybe that would be good to have, make sure we had them
Yeah,
periodically
multiple,
around,
yeah.
so that people clean up after.
Do we have garbage cans? Is it the idea, Monroe County Parks are carry in, carry out, and I'm not sure that always works. They have installed garbage cans at Ellison Park, but, so Penfield has,
We're not carry out, we have cans.
If garbage and recycling.
We would have specific dog ones.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask you a question. You guys have done a good job getting through this, and we're getting close to where we need to be now for the final. Does everybody feel comfortable with what you've done? Nobody felt intimidated or put out by any way that we were discussing this? Everybody's okay with it, the way we've done it? You're okay?
and I'll verbalize, and I feel more comfortable now, having gone through this, that within a month and a half, 2 months, we can come
Make
up
some
with
progress.
a
Yeah,
report. There was a lot of angst, I think, about that. I do wish that we had information from the RFP for Clark House back.
From the who?
The-
Well, even if you have the
Yeah,
RFP,
Not gonna impact us.
you don't have the 5 or the 50 people that are gonna respond to it. I mean,
Sure.
and that's gonna go on probably throughout the year, I would think.
Yeah, so we won't, yeah.
It won't be an overnight thing where we
No,
just
no,
pick,
it's
oh,
take forever.
we like you best, so we're taking you.
It's for a living.
There's all sorts of financial issues we're gonna have to go through and uncover to make sure whoever gets this property is
Right.
financially sound enough and has a
Yeah.
track record somewhere where they didn't, you know, abscond with $13 million and, you know.
The vetting process of somebody who does them for a living is an incredibly long,
It's a long
drawn-out
process,
process.
you're right.
There's a
If you do
lot
it
of
right.
due diligence that has to go
I
into it.
mean, it should take a while if you're doing it right. If you just jam it in real quickly, something's wrong. So, I mean, you'll see the RFP with no question. And certainly as a committee, and we've done this with other committees, we did our mixed use committee, we brought them back actually even a year or so afterwards just to go over some specific uses. We may submit these to you just to take a look at, and if you want to write something to the town board, you can do it. But it's going to come down to a lengthy investigative process to see who gets these uses.
Now, you were mentioning subcommittee. When would subcommittee?
I think that'd be after your next meeting. So next meeting, hopefully we can bring in Grok, hopefully we can bring in
Next meeting?
the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, hopefully they can bring them in so we can at least be decided and say, this is our recommendations, and then break up the
Okay.
group. So if you're very much into cross-country skiing and walking and hiking trails, maybe you and 2 other people could write up that section. Here's what we think the benefit is, here's what the cost impact is, here's the maintenance
We
of
have to
it.
do cost impact?
In general, it's not saying, we know they say dollars, but if Grok was, say,
Right.
what's a funding source? Well, the funding may come out of general town fund, or if Grok would create the trails, then that's a
That
funding
costs for
source.
them.
Or maintenance of the trails could be done by the high school or something else. So, no, you don't need to say, here's the budget
Okay,
estimate, but
thank you.
And we're not going to sit down on your own, we're going to kind of help
how would
you.
this be developed? So just kind of the why out of these items, so as you come back and say, yes, we're supportive of multi-use trails, we think they should be 10 feet wide and accommodate both
Okay.
bicycles and pedestrians walking. The funding could come from general town funds, or if there's another group from that. So kind of a paragraph for each item, just so we can kind of
Okay.
plug in and add a little thought process behind what the discussions were.
So do you envision that process being independent of these meetings, or are those going to be working sessions that we have? during these meetings?
If you could get your group together and you wanted to do it, maybe on a Saturday morning or something like that, and just knock it off, you could do that, and then bring the materials back, and we could share them with everybody. And yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to do it here exclusively. You may want to do it just as it's kind of easy to get everybody together. We'll certainly break you up into little pods around the room here, so you're not on top of each other. But if you wanted to work together outside the building, certainly you could do that.
Okay, so we will
You
adhere
might
to
need
these
to do
dates.
it just to make sure you're all
Yeah,
comfortable.
the March 1st is at 12, as Ginny highlighted. Whether we need all this time or not, we kind of just pencil them out. If we're done before that, we're done before that. We'll try to limit the groups to 15 to 20 minutes, so we're not the entire meeting next time. If they've got 15 minutes, can do their piece, and then we can break up into groups, and you guys can start doing some stuff and breaking up who's doing what, and then you want to meet on your own, and then come back in 2 weeks, and then we can, as a group, kind of go through what you've written.
The next meeting, we'll have 3 presenters.
We'll try to get them in for you.
Can I bring up one more point? I think it was Jim who alerted me to this, 2 or 3 meetings ago. We're talking about Harris Hill Park and the zoning there. And the discussion was, well, I think it is zoned a park over there or something.
No, we don't have a park zoning.
But anyway, whatever it was, the fellow, the farmer needed it, that keep it in the park, and it is a park. On the other hand, it's got all these lights, and maybe where it is, it's not too bad, maybe it is. But we certainly don't want that, it seems to me, we certainly don't want that kind of lighting in this property.
Yeah, that lighting occurred because of the football fields. and
Yeah,
how it is.
yeah. But I
Well,
mean,
you've already indicated you don't want to see that. That's why I asked that question earlier tonight
Yeah.
about just having an open field for kids to go out and throw a ball around. It's certainly not that. It's not to have football
well,
games.
maybe we
organized
might want
sports
to
out.
address in our reports some restrictions on lighting.
Absolutely. If
Yeah.
you want to talk about that, no
Yeah.
question.
Well, I think that one of the things we did, maybe knowingly or unnowingly, is kind of come up with some principles of what is acceptable in this park. Like,
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
like,
yeah.
no man-made fences,
Right.
no, we could say no, massive lighting or something. And we could structure that in our recommendation such that, so when future things come in, we go, okay, does it adhere to these major principles that we developed as part of this committee? And then it makes decision-making in the future easier too.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, those are the kind of things you have to think about, little side notes. You know, we're talking about a field, but we're not talking about organized fields that requires service and maintenance and lighting and everything. You know?
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things you want to kind of build in your recommendations.
Kind of like
General guidelines.
things that are very natural in its form.
And then we can share the report that's done by the moratorium committee.
We'll get that out.
Kind of had a template, so you can kind of see some of the stuff that they've done, so you kind of know some of the items that if you're making a recommendation, and the pieces and parts that come with that. So we'll be here to guide you, support whatever you need, if you need more information.
And you can tweak that to your needs. You know, you don't have to follow.
Yeah, it's not hard and fast, but you know,
It's just a
can't-
format to look at. So they did a good job. I got to give them credit. They did a great
That
job
was
on
those
it.
spreadsheet, the sheets that we did.
Well, the actual final product.
The final report.
We got it.
We had.
We have
We got it.
that.
Everybody
First
has
I think we have it,
You
yeah.
can never let us know which you do.
Yeah, we
But I thought that was a good template that they kind of went down through the items and explained a little bit about the thought process.
We had a,
Did you
we
get
had
it
a study, we had a woman from the Arundecoy
Carrie.
town board.
Carrie Ivers, yeah.
Yeah, that she volunteered to
Yeah.
do the wordsmithing.
Yes. Do you have it electronically? or do you have
We need a volunteer.
Oh, is that what
And I
you
think that Zach put it on the Google
Because if you
Docs,
want,
yeah.
we can send it to you.
We all fit our
Oh, I think
stuff and
Zach
she
has
put
it
it all
on the Google
together.
Docs, and then we have a hard copy of it.
Boy, that's
Yeah, I think it's on the town website, isn't it? You can just download
Yeah, it is.
It's probably in
Probably a PDF.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to play with that one, but
We've got
if you
the
need
Word
one that you can go out and
documents.
tweak with and play with, we'll get that.
Okay, as we were talking about the name, this is just kind of a funny thing. But I started thinking about the Golden Girls, the show, because it wasn't the nursing home Shady Pines.
Yes.
So now we all think about Shady Pines.
Right.
Brush out of our minds.
idea.
Thanks, Trisha. It was,
Sorry, I
yeah.
had to share that with everyone.
Never get that out of my head.
All right, you just did a great job tonight. We're gonna- As a gift, we're gonna let you go home.
Oh, yeah.
When did you
All right.
attempt to get,
So
So,
February 12th is our next meeting.
how long were you,
Okay.
did you go on?
good job.
Big change. We'll get it ready for the cold
Thanks
weather.
for all your help.
Yeah, stay warm.
Get that fire started tonight.
Did you go to?